Before the pyramids rose from desert sand, before writing gave voice to human thought, before time itself had names carved into stone, there was fire. In a place now buried beneath the endless deserts of Iraq, humans stood before glowing metal and understood something no one should have known. They smelted copper with impossible precision, cast alloys that should not have existed for another 1,000 years, and left behind fragments that whisper of lost knowledge across the gulf of millennia. How did the Sumerians, the first civilization to walk this earth, become masters of a science that would take us thousands of years to rediscover? This is not merely a story of archaeology or ancient technology. This is the story of the human mind itself, of how, at the very dawn of recorded history, we touch something eternal and inexplicable, the paradox of knowing more than we could possibly explain. Listen closely. Can you hear it? The rhythmic hammering echoes across 5,000 years. Each strike of metal upon metal beats like a heart, and with each molten drop that falls, we move closer to understanding a mystery that refuses to be solved. The wind moves across the Mesopotamian plain with the patience of eternity. Sand shifts and settles over ruins that once held the world's first cities. This is Sumer, the cradle of civilization, a land that gave birth to writing, law, astronomy, and mathematics when most of humanity still moved as nomads beneath open skies. 5,000 years ago, in this place between two rivers, humans gathered around fires and changed the world forever. When archaeologists first uncovered the buried workshops of ancient Ur, they found something that should not have existed. Among the clay tablets and broken pottery, they discovered copper tools of extraordinary uniformity, mirrors polished to impossible smoothness, figurines cast with such precision that modern craftsmen pause in wonder, metal fragments showing purity and consistency that our ancestors should not have been able to achieve for another millennium. The evidence speaks in whispers that grow louder with each discovery. These artifacts reveal uniform smelting temperatures, metallurgical control that requires knowledge we assumed did not exist in that ancient world. The copper shows no signs of impurity, no evidence of the trial and error we would expect from humanity's first experiments with metal. Instead, we find perfection where there should be only crude beginnings. Look at the cuneiform tablets that line museum walls. Among the inventories and hymns, there are no instruction manuals for metallurgy, no recipes for achieving such precision. Yet the metal itself tells a different story. It speaks of mastery, of understanding so deep that it needed no words to describe it. Between the flickering light of ancient forges and the images of gods holding mysterious tools, a question emerges that refuses to be silenced. How did the first humans to build cities create such perfection before the technology existed to measure it? How did they achieve what we, with all our instruments and scientific knowledge, struggle to replicate? The copper glows in the darkness of history, reflecting a light we cannot quite identify. It is the light of human intelligence awakening to its own potential, and it burns with an intensity that makes us question everything we thought we knew about the birth of civilization. The archaeological record grows more puzzling the deeper we dig. At sites like Ur, Eridu, and Tel Ubaid, researchers have uncovered the remains of ancient furnaces and copper smelting pits. These installations are remarkably sophisticated in design, yet they present us with an impossible equation. The tools available to Sumerian metalworkers were simple beyond belief. Clay crucibles molded by hand, primitive bellows made from animal skins, kilns constructed from mud, brick, and stone. With such basic equipment, achieving consistent metal purity should have been virtually impossible. Temperature control in metallurgy requires precision measured in degrees. Too cool, and the copper remains locked in its ore. Too hot, and impurities create brittleness and weakness. The Sumerians had no thermometers, no pyrometers, no instruments of any kind to measure heat. Yet somehow, they produced copper of such consistent quality that it rivals what we create in modern foundries with digital temperature controls and computer monitoring systems. Modern metallurgists have attempted to recreate Sumerian techniques using reconstructions of their tools and methods. These experiments have yielded fascinating results and troubling questions. Even with our understanding of chemistry and physics, even knowing exactly what temperatures we need to achieve, researchers struggle to match the consistency found in ancient Sumerian artifacts. The metal produced in experimental archaeology varies wildly in quality. Some batches emerge pure and strong. Others contain impurities that make them brittle or discolored. The Sumerians, working 5,000 years ago, seem to avoid these problems entirely. The paradox becomes more explicit the more we examine it. They possessed no scientific theory of metallurgy, no understanding of atomic structure or chemical reactions. They had no means to measure temperature beyond the evidence of their own senses. Yet their outcomes match or exceed what we achieve with sophisticated technology. How is this possible? What knowledge did they possess that we have lost or forgotten? Several theories have emerged to explain this mystery. Some researchers propose intuitive mastery, arguing that knowledge passed down through countless generations of artisans created an embodied understanding that transcended conscious thought. After centuries of working metal, perhaps the Sumerians developed an almost supernatural sensitivity to the subtle signs of temperature and chemical change. Others point to observation of natural processes. Volcanic glass forms when lava cools rapidly. Meteorites contain pure metals forged in the death throes of ancient stars. Could the Sumerians have learned from nature itself, watching how the earth creates perfection without instruments or measurement? A third theory suggests something more profound, that symbolic thinking served as a form of proto-science. The Sumerians were the first people to develop complex religious rituals, elaborate ceremonies performed with exacting precision. Perhaps this ritual exactitude, this insistence on doing things exactly the same way every time, translated into empirical consistency in their metalworking. The precision of prayer became the precision of the forge. What emerges from these theories is a revelation that changes how we understand ancient knowledge. The Sumerians did not work metal the way we do. Their knowledge was not mechanical but sensory. They felt temperature in ways we can no longer imagine. They heard the voice of molten metal, recognized its readiness through sound rather than measurement. They read color as code, understanding that the exact shade of orange or yellow in glowing copper told them everything they needed to know about its internal transformation. We begin to see them not as primitives stumbling toward civilization, but as savants possessing a form of intelligence we have traded away in our pursuit of mechanical precision. Their minds worked differently than ours, attuned to subtle patterns we can no longer perceive. In the glow of their forges, they achieved something we have spent millennia trying to recapture, the ability to know without knowing how we know. To understand Sumerian metallurgy, we must first understand the Sumerian mind. In their worldview, which seems so alien to our modern sensibilities, there was no separation between the sacred and the practical, between religion and what we would call science. Every act of creation was simultaneously a technical process and a spiritual communion. When a metalworker stood before his furnace, he was not merely heating copper. He was participating in the fundamental transformation of reality itself, a transformation that mirrored the creative acts of the gods. The blacksmith occupied a unique position in Sumerian society. He was not simply a laborer or craftsman. He held the status of a priest, an intermediary between the human world and the divine realm of transformation. His workshop was a temple, his furnace an altar. The act of turning dull ore into gleaming metal was understood as a sacred mystery, a revelation of hidden truths about the nature of existence. Metallurgy, writing, and astronomy were all understood as different aspects of the same divine knowledge, different ways of reading the language in which the gods had written the universe. This unity of purpose, this refusal to separate the sacred from the scientific, produced results that transcend rational explanation. When making metal became an act of devotion, when every heating and cooling was performed with the precision of ritual, the metalworker entered a state of consciousness we can barely imagine. Devotion and experimentation merged into a single continuous act of understanding. The accumulation of technical knowledge became inseparable from spiritual development. To become a better metalworker meant becoming a more complete human being. Modern cognitive science offers us a way to understand how this might have worked. Research into human pattern recognition shows that our brains can achieve extraordinary feats of perception and judgment without any conscious understanding of how we do it. An experienced musician can hear when an instrument is out of tune by fractions of a frequency. A master chef knows when a sauce is ready through a combination of visual, olfactory, and even auditory cues that they cannot fully articulate. Their knowledge is real and reproducible, but it exists below the level of conscious thought, encoded in neural pathways shaped by thousands of hours of practice. The Sumerian metalworkers operated at this level of mastery, but with an intensity and dedication we rarely see in our modern world. Their precision was not mathematical but experiential. It emerged from sensory calibration refined over lifetimes of focused attention. Memory played a crucial role, not the explicit memory of facts and figures, but the implicit memory stored in muscle and nerve. Their bodies remembered the correct sequence of actions, the proper rhythm of heating and hammering, the exact moment when glowing copper reached the perfect temperature for pouring. Ritual repetition served as the mechanism for encoding this knowledge. By performing the same actions in the same sequence every single time, by treating each step of the process as sacred and inviolable, they created a form of quality control more reliable than any written checklist or measurement protocol. Deviation from the ritual meant deviation from perfection. Maintaining the ritual meant maintaining the precision of the product. Here we encounter a profound philosophical question that extends far beyond ancient metallurgy. Perhaps knowledge does not begin with reasoning, with the logical analysis we associate with science. Perhaps knowledge begins with reverence, with the deep attention and care we bring to understanding something greater than ourselves. The Sumerians approached their work with a seriousness of purpose that transformed observation into insight. They did not merely look at their materials. They contemplated them, meditated upon them, allowed their understanding to deepen through repeated exposure and focused attention. We feel ourselves growing closer to these ancient minds across the vast gulf of time. There is an intimacy in this understanding, a recognition of something fundamentally human that persists beneath all cultural and technological change. They were not alien to us. They were us, stripped of the barriers we have erected between thought and feeling, between knowing and being. In their forges, the human mind discovered itself for the first time, recognized its own capacity for precision and beauty. In a modern metallurgy laboratory, scientists carefully reconstruct ancient Sumerian smelting processes. They have studied the archaeological evidence exhaustively. They understand the chemical composition of Sumerian ores, the structure of their furnaces, the properties of their tools. With meticulous care, they replicate every aspect of the ancient techniques, using only materials and methods available 5,000 years ago. The results are humbling. The copper alloys they produce match the consistency found in Sumerian artifacts with surprising accuracy. But here is what troubles the researchers most deeply. The precision achieved by the ancients was not accidental or intermittent. It was systematic and reproducible. Every batch of copper showed the same high quality, the same purity, the same structural integrity. The Sumerians achieved this perfection through observation rather than calculation, through feeling rather than measurement. A profound realization emerges from these experiments. We have built elaborate machines to measure what the Sumerians could already feel. Our thermometers and spectrometers and computerized monitoring systems are sophisticated prosthetics, technological extensions designed to replace sensory capabilities that humans once possessed naturally. We needed to invent these instruments because we had lost the ability to perceive directly what our ancestors knew through their bodies. This raises an uncomfortable question that resonates through our technological age. Did we lose something essential when we mechanized understanding? Did the transition from embodied knowledge to abstract theory come at a cost we have not fully recognized? The Sumerians knew metal intimately, knew it in ways that cannot be captured in formulas or reduced to data points. They understood it through touch and sight and sound, through the subtle feedback of their own nervous systems calibrated by years of attentive practice. Anthropologists speak of ancestral cognition, knowledge that exists in practice rather than theory, understanding that lives in the doing rather than in the description of what is done. This form of knowledge is simultaneously more fragile and more robust than written science. It is fragile because it can be lost in a single generation if the chain of transmission breaks, if the master dies before passing knowledge to an apprentice. Yet it is robust because once truly learned, Once fully embodied, it becomes nearly automatic, requiring no conscious thought or calculation. We return now to the desert, to the silence that blankets the ruins of Ur and Eridu. Sand covers the ancient workshops where copper once flowed like liquid sunlight, but here, scattered among the broken bricks, fragments of that copper still gleam in the harsh light of day. Pick one up, feel its weight in your hand. This piece of metal, forged 5,000 years ago by hands that have returned to dust, still carries the signature of its maker. The uniformity of its grain structure, the purity of its composition, these qualities speak across time of a knowledge that required no words. Their hands remembered what their minds could not describe. This is the essence of the mystery, the heart of the paradox that has guided us through this exploration. The Sumerian metalworkers achieved their impossible precision not through intellectual understanding, but through a form of knowing that preceded language, that existed in the realm of sensation and instinct and practiced skill. They did not need to understand why their methods worked. They needed only to feel when they were right. In their forges, humanity encountered its own reflection, saw itself mirrored in metal and fire. This was not merely the birth of technology, though it was certainly that. It was something more fundamental and more mysterious. It was the awakening of mind itself, the moment when human consciousness recognized its own capacity to transform the world through focused attention and disciplined practice. The copper they created became a mirror showing them their own potential, revealing depths of ability they had not known they possessed. The mystery remains unsolved in any conventional sense. We cannot fully explain how they achieved what they achieved. We cannot reduce their knowledge to a formula or capture it in a textbook. But perhaps the mystery has been redefined, transformed from a puzzle-demanding solution into a spiritual paradox inviting endless contemplation. Some truths cannot be solved, only experienced and honored. We still chase precision across the centuries and millennia. We still stand before fire, trying to capture perfection in its most tangible form. Every alloy we create, every microchip we manufacture, every spacecraft we send toward distant stars begins with the same fundamental act. It begins with a human hand reaching toward the impossible, trying to transform raw material into something pure and purposeful. The Sumerian metalworkers were not ahead of their time in any conventional sense. They did not possess futuristic knowledge or alien technology. They were not visited by gods bearing the secrets of metallurgy. Yet in another sense, perhaps time itself is still trying to catch up with them. They understood something about the relationship between human consciousness and material reality that we are only beginning to rediscover. They knew that precision emerges not from measurement, but from attention, not from calculation, but from care.